Out of the darkness they came with a hateful will to destroy humanity. We fought long and hard, but now we are lost, for they have taken their evil war into our past. Traveling through time, they have sown corruption, unraveling the fabric of our history.
Timesplitters 2 is the sequel to Timesplitters, released in 2002 for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. It's a sequel that improves almost every aspect of the original game across the board, and is arguably one of the best console shooting games ever made. In a similar vein to the first game, the story mode is broken up between 10 levels, taking place in multiple time zones and locations. These range from 1930s Chicago through to well into the 22nd century on fictional alien planets. This time around, there's much more of a focus on the single player mode, with it not just being a matter of rushing through a level before running back to the exit point. Instead, each level has a series of objectives that have to be completed, and these vary greatly between missions. The very first mission, for instance, requires you to take out a satellite dish, restore power to an entire facility, destroy a series of filing cabinets, and then take down a military chopper with turret guns. Difficulty modes not only affect the amount of damage you take, but also the objectives themselves, making certain levels really tricky. This is difficulty modes done properly, and much like Timesplitters 1, the levels are often really tight with the healing items, so you really got to know what the hell you're doing. Overall, there's a lot more polish and focus on the single player this time around, with each mission taking anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to complete. They also show off some very well scripted cinematic intros for each time period that are well written and genuinely pretty funny.
Sit down! You devil, let go!
What am I worried about? It's not me that's got to tell the boss.
This is a game that has a lot of charm, much like its predecessor, and the constant shift in protagonists and themes mission to mission is definitely one of the game's biggest strengths.
Has anyone ever told you you have a screw loose?
Visually, it looks leaps and bounds above the first game, with highly detailed weapon and character models and some clever graphical effects. One of the levels set in Neo Tokyo has a real Blade Runner vibe and a great looking thunderstorm, and there's some other standouts throughout the campaign as well that still look pretty good. There's a great level set in the Wild West with a real spaghetti western tone. Another set in an Aztec temple that feels like a tongue-in-cheek Indiana Jones. And also one where you're in a rocket base trying to stop an evil genius from blowing up the world. Unfortunately, the campaign also suffers from similar problems to the first game. Once again, the quality of each mission is really up and down. None of them are flat out bad, but some of them can be a bit of a pain in the arse. The Neo Tokyo mission, for instance, requires you to follow an NPC through the city streets, avoiding security cameras and passing police vehicles, and it all just comes down to trial and error. If you fail any of the main objectives, you have to restart the whole level from scratch. A good example of this is one set in Paris, where you've got to rescue these so-called maidens from flesh-eating zombies. Now, the zombies have a penchant for maiden flesh, it seems, because half the time they beeline towards the poor things and kill them instantly. But these are the kind of things that are going to get you replaying certain sections over and over again until you memorize these traps and make sure you prevent them from happening. They have included checkpoints this time around, which is a nice change, but you literally only get one checkpoint a level, and they're not necessarily put at the halfway mark either. Like, for instance, you'd expect to get one before a boss fight, but often you don't get jack shit. The first mission in the game is really one of the best in terms of its structure and content, and as a result, the ensuing levels can seem a little bit weak by comparison. Some of the weapons aren't particularly useful either. Most of the ones from the sci-fi levels, I mean, they just feel really crappy and underpowered. There's a few cool new additions here and there, but most of them you'll probably play with once out of curiosity, then never use again. Completing all of these missions unlocks content for you to use in creating your own multiplayer matches, but it's not where the vast majority of stuff is going to come from. Instead, that would be from the challenges and a new game mode called the Arcade League. Now, the Arcade League is a series of multiplayer matches against bots, which all have different parameters and game modes required for success. Capture the flag, last man standing, or just straight up deathmatch as an example. These are broken up into 3 difficulty modes and then broken up again into 6 or so subcategories, which themselves contain 3 matches each. It sounds like a lot of stuff to get through, and it is. Depending on how you do in each match, you'll either earn a bronze, silver, or gold medal, with the gold being needed to unlock all the available content for that match. This is normally just a new character model, but could be something like a new multiplayer map or an entirely new game mode. now making it sound more complex than it really is, and all it really boils down to is that you've got a shitload of matches to play through and master until you unlock everything the game has to offer. It makes the first game seem anorexic by comparison. Usually the difficulty for the Arcade League is balanced enough, though some of the later levels are cheap as all hell, and the only way to get the best possible result in these is a combination of sheer luck and also exploiting the AI. And in some of the later levels, they also give them shitloads of health points, making it just really tricky to kill them. Now look, I get it, okay, these are supposed to be hard and all that shit, but they just come off as unfairly difficult at times, and some of them in particular are the textbook example of artificial difficulty. This is supposed to be played for fun after all, and replaying certain things 50 fucking times doesn't really equate to that in my books. Playing these as you would any of the other levels is just impossible, and sadly if you want to see everything the game has to offer, you're going to have to face this mode and master it eventually. But it is all kind of worth it once you start getting into creating your own custom multiplayer matches. Once again, Free Radical have really outdone themselves in terms of the amount of stuff that you can play around with and modify. I mean, there must be hundreds if not thousands of ways you can create your own games. From the weapon and bot setups through to the limitations and rules of each match itself. It's staggering. Even after playing for a good 8 or 9 hours, I still hadn't unlocked all of the multiplayer maps, and there was still a good dozen, if not more, characters I had yet to access. This really is a game with a crap load of depth, and like I said earlier, it trumps the first game in every conceivable way, from the visuals through to the mechanics and the gameplay on a much deeper level. That's not to say that the first game is a write-off, but if you've got these two side by side, the choice is simple.
Good luck.
Thanks.
I got a copy of Timesplitters 2 for my birthday when it first came out, and it was one of the first console shooting games that I ever sunk some serious hours into. Now, I might be a little bit biased, but I really think it hasn't aged all that badly for the most part, and I still fondly remember playing split-screen matches of multiplayer games with friends and having a really good time with it. And even now, playing through it again to get the footage for this review, I'm reminded just how enjoyable and fun it is overall, and I'm sure anyone else who gets their hands on it will think the same thing. I can remember reading a review for this game in a magazine that basically said that this game would appeal to anyone with reflexes and a central nervous system, and I couldn't have said it better if I tried.